lesson 2 of Unit 7. So the first lesson you would have just read through a couple paragraphs. So there was no recording, so this is the first recorded lesson, and we're going to be doing an introduction to credit cards. So it says, use the words from the following word box to complete the statement in the next two sections below. So, we don't really have to, we can kind of ignore that. So how do credit cards work? So the customer blank presents the credit card to the merchant. So the customer is the buyer who presents the credit card to the merchant, who is the seller. And a lot of this you're obviously going to understand because you guys likely have at least debit cards, if not credit cards. So the merchant is going to charges the credit card company for the cost of the item. The credit card company then bills the customer, bills their credit card for the amount. Okay, so how do credit card companies make money? So the credit card companies charge the customer interest if the bill amount is not paid off in full. They charge the customer immediate interest on cash advances and they set high interest rates and compound interest rates on unpaid balances. Lastly, credit card companies charge the buyer a small amount, 2 to 3%, for each purchase made. No, that should be seller. They charge the seller. So anytime like you use your credit card to purchase something, typically that company that you're buying from will have to pay a small percent to that credit card company. Okay, so identify some advantages and some disadvantages of having and using a credit card. So if you have a credit card, an advantage is basically you can buy whatever you want without having the money. Buy without having the money. Okay. Another advantage to credit cards is that they can increase your credit score. Can increase credit score. We're just going to stick with those two for now because I don't want to kind of give them all away. So some disadvantages, if you use your credit card and you don't pay it off on time, you are going to pay interest. Specifically, they have high rates, as we read above. It can end up putting you in debt, right? Because you don't actually have that money. So you technically have debt that you have to pay off. And just like it can increase your credit score, it can also ruin your credit score if you don't pay things off. Making credit card payments and how credit card companies charge interest. So from the time your bill arrives, companies offer a 21-day grace period before they charge you interest. So any interest charged on that bill will be added to your next bill. So you have 21 days from when you get the bill, and honestly, most of you will probably get those electronically, just on your account online. You have 21 days before you're going to be charged interest on that. If you pay your balance in full by the due date, you will not pay any interest. Okay, you will just simply pay the amount that you put on your credit card. So say you stopped and got gas, You put $50 on your credit card, you pay that off right away, you're not going to pay interest. Credit card companies require you make a minimum payment. So if, sticking with our scenario, we stop to get gas for $50, they will make you pay a minimum payment on that. They will not say you have to pay the whole thing, but they will say you have to pay a certain amount. So the minimum payment is usually a % of your balance. So for example, like 5%, or it will be a set amount. So, or they will say you have to pay $20, whichever is more. So if the percent ends up being more, you would pay that. Or if the set amount is more, you would pay that. If you do not pay your bill in full, so pay all of it off by the due date, simple interest is charged from the date of purchase until the due date of the bill. After that, interest is compounded until the balance is paid off. Okay, so we should know what that means. Basically, you want, like, just to summarize this whole page in one sentence, pay your credit card off in full. And that just means don't pay the minimum payment because you're going to end up paying interest. Just pay that whole $50 off every single time. Okay, so moving on to kind of the math side of it, now that we have a bit of background on credit cards, we're going to be talking about payments and interest. So suppose you buy a $545 bike, so that would be plus that 13% HST, using your credit card on March 2nd. No other purchases are made using your credit card. The annual interest rate on your card is 18.9%. So that is a realistic example, and you can see that that's quite high, right? So I'm just going to highlight some of the information. Oops. And the date we made it. Okay. If you receive your credit card bill on March 15th, what will be the due date on the bill? So that due date is going to be 21 days after the statement date. So after your bill is mailed or sent to you. So I just looked at a calendar for this. 21 days after March 15th is April 5th. So you would just count 21 days. If your credit card company requires a minimum payment of 4% or $20, whatever is more, what will your minimum payment be? So the first thing we need to do is calculate the price including tax. So in order to do this, very, very simple. You just take the cost of your bike, $545, and you're going to multiply it by 1.13. Okay, so that will give you the total with tax. Okay, and it's always going to be, you're always going to multiply by 1.13 to add tax. And I'll just make a note of that over here. Multiply to add tax. Okay, so calculate the minimum percentage. So it's saying 4% of that total. So anytime you see the word of actually means multiply. So we take our total with tax and we multiply it by 4% as a decimal. So again, just like that unit before, we need to divide that by 100 to get our decimal. So times 0.04, and that gives us $24.63. Okay, so compared with the set amount, so the set amount is $20. So we know that we would have to pay the 4% because it's more. So pay 4% because it is more money. Okay, if you forget to pay your bill until April 10th, at which time you pay the entire balance, how much interest will be charged? So how much interest is going to be added to your next bill? So April 10th is 5 days after the due date, right? The due date was April 5th. So what that means is that simple interest is going to be charged from the day we purchased. And the only reason it's charged from the day we purchased is because we didn't pay it in full. If you would have paid it in full before the due date, you would not have to pay any of this interest. Okay, so simple interest is charged from the day you purchase up until the day you get your bill, okay, which is 34 days. And then compound interest is going to be charged from the day you get your bill to the day you pay it. Okay, whoops. Pay it on the 10th, which is 5 days. So we need to figure out how much we're going to be charged in interest. We need to find both the simple interest and the compound interest. So I'm going to start with simple. Okay, so all you're doing is you're using the formula you learned in the last unit. So our formula for simple interest is I equals PRT. Okay, again, I'm going to start by listing out the information that I know. I know the price of that bike, or the principal, what we're starting with, was $615.85. My rate was 18.9%, so as a decimal, 0.189. And my time period is 34 days. Remember, the time always has to be written in years. So that's 34 divided by 365. Which you can leave as a fraction or turn into a decimal. So that decimal is 0.09. Okay, after that, all you have to do is plug that information into your formula, which just says we have to multiply all of those together. That gives us $10.48. So it might not seem like a lot, right? But that's an extra $10 that you have to pay on your bike just because you used your credit card. Okay, and that's just the simple interest. So now we would move on to the compound, which we know is a bit more complicated, right, from our last unit. So the equation for compound interest is A equals P 1 plus I to the power of N. Okay, so again, you want to list out all of those variables. So our principal, or the price we paid, was the same, $615.85. My interest, because this is compounded annually, we need to divide that by 365. And my N is 5 days, right? So 5 days, again, that has to be in years. So we have to divide by 365, but we also need to multiply by 365 days. Okay, and the reason for that is because that's our time period, right? So we need to, just like before, we always put our N in years first. So we have to figure out what 5 days is in years. So that's going to be a decimal. But we always have to multiply by our rate. So sorry, I said annually. This is going to be compounded daily. Okay, that's why it's 5 days. So compounded daily. That's why we have to divide by 365 and then multiply by 365, which means these are just going to cancel. So my end value is 5. Okay, so now all I have to do is plug my information into my equation. To the power of 5. So again, make sure you're following BEDMAS here. That means your amount equals 617.45. So remember, A stands for amount, right? We didn't just calculate the interest, we calculated the total amount. But that's fine because we also have our formula. Let me use a different color. I equals A minus P. So interest equals the total amount minus the initial amount, which is $1.60. So thankfully, we only were compounding for 5 days, right? So we only generated $1.60 in that interest. So in order to find our total interest, we would have to add those two values together. So in simple interest, we had $10.48. In compound, we had $1.60 in interest. So in total, we would have to pay $12.08 in interest because we didn't pay our total amount off right away. So I know $12 doesn't seem like that much money, but it will add up eventually, right? And like you can get a decent amount for $12, right? You could went out for lunch, went to Tim's a couple of days. So you don't want to just not pay your credit card and then have to waste this $12 and get nothing for it. Okay, so one more example here. Credit card features. So some offer lower interest rates and some offer reward programs. Okay, so those could be seen as travel rewards. So your parents might have air miles. You could get cash back. Sometimes there's retail purchases. It just depends on the card. So, for example, a credit card company offers 2% cash back on all purchases. Over time, how much would you need to spend to get $50 cash back? So, how we're going to set up our equation here, we need to have $50, right? That's our goal. We want $50 at the end. And we know that we're getting 0.02%, right, for every purchase. So we'll call that X. So X equals, let's just say, purchases in dollars. Okay, so for every purchase, you get that 2% back. So all we have to do here is simply solve for X. So it's just simply solving an equation. So we have 0.02 times X. The opposite of multiplication is division. What we do to one side, we have to do to the other. 50 divided by 0.02, $2,500. Okay, so to get $50 back, you need to spend $2,500. So you would So as you can see, you have to spend a lot of money to get $50 back, right? So although these seem like incentives to spend money, it's really not worth it to spend money just to get this 2% back. But if you are using your credit card, it is a nice little added bonus. So this is the end of the note on introductions to credit cards.